He couldn't tell you what Officer Holly was at that point because he had his back to him. He could have made it up and said, no, I saw him, but he didn't do that. He was running for his life. As he told you, he could tell you where he was, but I could tell you where he wasn't. He wasn't over here where I was looking, and I wasn't firing. He could certainly tell you that. And Patsy Jones can tell you, well, the officer was right there next to me initially when the gun came out. Then I heard, hold up, and Officer Goya said it wasn't him, so we know that the person who said, hold up, was Officer Anthony Palmer. Nobody else was talking. There were no other people there. By that point, according to what they've already admitted, Goya had already taken off. So there's only two people left. It wasn't the defendant, so circumstantially speaking, it was Anthony Hawley. And you see where his body was found, in the back of the Kia, facing westbound, out toward the middle of the street. Yes, he moved at that point, and he was moving, trying to get away, because before anything else happened, while Officer Goya was running, there was the shot that rang out by the defendant. Patsy Jones told you that. Officer Goya told you that. Officer Goya can't tell you where Officer Hawley was. Neither can Patsy Jones, but the first person shooting was the defendant. And then she sees him again going back there and shooting. Well, who's back there? The only person that's still moving at that point is Goya, because Hawley was very close to the back of the car. It was very quick for him. He was not able to get away. Again, it's a function of time. So who do these set of facts tell you fired the shot? The defendant. Absolutely nobody else. So when Officer Goya then finally turns around and begins shooting, he said, well, he could have stood up here and he could have told you. And that's the mark of someone who is being consistent to the truth. But he could have told you, hey, I saw him and I didn't shoot him. But he said, I was focused. I was focused on the threat. I was not focused on the person shooting at me. It was light, so he could see him. It wasn't like he couldn't see. I was focused on that person, and I know one thing. I know where Officer Hawley wasn't. He wasn't in my line of fire. So circumstantially, this is the guy who did the killing. And Officer Goya said, for example, you know, I know there's a bathroom up here on the 5th floor. Remember him telling me that? I can't see it. I'm a witness there. But I can certainly tell you where it is. And the same thing with regard to Officer Hawley. He was watching a threat. He wasn't watching anything else. So if he was shooting at the defendant. And you saw where the shots went, following the defendant as he went along. So the defendant shot and killed Officer Hawley. One shot, went down. And he tries to kill the other officer. He doesn't want any witnesses, of course, because he can then really get away, right? Isn't this the big person that he is? The person who brings a .357, and it is his .357. The duffel bag does have identification with his name on it. It is not Patsy Jones, and it certainly does not belong to Giada Costas. So it's his. Nobody else has a gun. And then he goes to get away, but he takes a fighting shot. Then he goes around the corner. And as he goes around the corner, that's about the time that Officer Goya is able to get him in the knee. And then he takes off and runs. And by runs, I mean, I don't know if he was running, we don't know that he was hit in the knee. Maybe he walked, maybe he did something else. But he was able to get some portion away down towards 59th Avenue, where the police took him into custody. And when they took him into custody, when they arrested him, he's the individual that had .357 handgun, the one that had 4 shots in it that had been expended. Same number that Patsy Jones told you that she heard. There's no reason to believe that just because her teeth are bad doesn't mean her hearing is bad. There's no indication of that. There's no indication that just because her teeth are bad, her eyesight was not there. It was all there. And the same thing with Officer David Goya. Just because some guy tried to run him down doesn't mean he can't remember. It doesn't mean he can't see. It doesn't mean he can't hear. They both agreed that it was 4 shots. That's what Patsy Jones told you. And they take the defendant into custody, and that gun is there. And one of the interesting parts about it is that the gun, the hammer, is actually over a live round. It indicates he was trying to fire more shots. He just wasn't able to get that shot off for whatever reason. Maybe he had the strap from his man purse on, and we don't know exactly, but we know the man purse was involved because it took it around. Take a look at the man purse. There's a shot that went through. So it wasn't like David Goitia panicked and he was shooting all over the place. He was shooting at this individual. He hit him once, and he hit the man purse another time, and then you saw the other rounds that were there. The side of the building, yes, he did hit a car. But the evidence showed that none of his rounds went across the street, past a field, and into the eaves of that trailer. Even their expert told you that that was impossible. Yet, they presented that to you because that's the reality that they want to create. They want you to believe that because they told you. You know? That's what they want you to have, is faith in what they tell you. But what does the law tell you? What does the jury instructions tell you? Well, one of the things that the jury instructions tell you is that, and it was the second paragraph, it's that it's your duty to determine what the facts are in the case by determining what actually happened. Determine the facts only from the evidence produced in court. When I say evidence, I mean the testimony of witnesses and the exhibits introduced in court. You should not guess about anything. You're not here to help either side. You're not here to say, well, yeah, but counsel, the defendant said, intimated that, the other shots could have been fired somewhere else. You're not supposed to speculate about that. That's what the judge told you. What you have here is a gun with 4 expended rounds, the defendant's gun, and what you have is 2 people saying that there were 4 rounds that were fired. You are not to guess about any facts. And in fact, it tells you here that what the lawyers say is not evidence. So that's one of the things that the law tells you. And it is your duty to follow these laws and these instructions. Obviously, when you see that one applies and one doesn't apply, well then you pick and choose as to which one may or may not apply. And the standard that you apply is called the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. Again, it's on page 3. You have it. It's already been read no less than an hour ago, so no need to follow. It just says proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof that leaves you firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. And it bears putting up there that it says there are very few things in this world that we know with absolute certainty. And in criminal cases, the law does not require proof that overcomes every doubt. If, based on your consideration of the evidence, you are firmly convinced that the defendant is guilty of the crime, in this case it would be the crime is charged, you must find the defendant guilty. That's how you apply it. Being firmly convinced. The state does not have to overcome every doubt. In other words, when they want you to speculate about whether or not the gun had been fired, the state is not required to overcome every doubt, including speculative doubt. The facts were presented to you, and the jury instructions guide you that you are not to go into this fanciful world of magicians or this fanciful world where that view of reality is without resort to the truth. You need to decide this case based on the facts that were presented in court. And so we know that there is a jury instruction that tells you that what expert witnesses tell you, for example, such as Mr. Green, the person who wanted to tell you about his vacation, somebody like that, you are to consider what they tell you. But you don't have to accept everything they tell you. You can accept some things, you can reject some things. It is up to you to decide what their testimony is in light of everything else and in the light of how they testify. So, what are the charged offenses here? There are 2. There's first-degree murder involving Anthony Hawley, and then there's also the attempted first-degree murder of Officer David Goitia. And the judge has read those to you and indicated to you that The first element that the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt is that the defendant engaged in conduct, intending or knowing that the conduct would cause the death of a person who the defendant knows is a law enforcement officer. And the thing to point out there is that it says the defendant engaged in conduct intending or knowing. That's in the disjunctive. When you start talking to you, well, he didn't intend to do this or didn't intend to do that, but did he know? That's a different standard. Knowing something is different than intending. Did he know that a gun, if produced, that has bullets in it, if a gun has bullets in it and you pull the trigger, is something going to come out? And if it hits somebody, did he know that it could kill somebody? Well, everybody knows that. So did he engage in conduct knowing that his conduct would cause the death of a person? Sure. You start shooting at somebody, that's what's going to happen. And did he know he was a law enforcement officer? There's no doubt about that. There's uniforms all over the place. There's police cars all over the place. And number two, the law enforcement officer was in the line of duty. It may have been President's Day, but David Goya was in the line of duty. And the defendant caused the death of a law enforcement officer. He did shoot Officer Anthony Holly. Shot him right in the side of the face. That bullet was through and through, and it killed him. Officer Holly, it can't be said that perhaps if treatment would have been rendered, that he would have survived. No, there's no indication of that. What Patsy Jones told you was that when she got out of the car and she came around and looked down, she saw Officer Anthony Holland trying to get up. And you heard from the medical examiner that a person can take 1 or 2 stabs, even if they suffer this type of injury. He was trying to get up. This incompetent officer was perhaps still trying to get away. This incompetent officer, maybe he was trying to draw his gun, but he was trying to get up at that point. He was able to move his head. He looked up at Patsy Jones, and he started spitting out blood. So was this a law enforcement officer? No doubt about that. Did the defendant kill him? Yeah. He's the person that's firing at him before Officer David Goya even returned fire at him when he was already near the side of the house. By their own admission, there was a time span, a period before when Officer Goya ran. They made a big deal of how Officer Goya ran. Well, you've seen Officer Goya, no disrespect, but doesn't look from seeing him walk up to the witness stand that he's the fastest step runner. So it took some time for him to get from the Kia over to 60th Avenue in Oregon. And it was during that time the defendant dispatched or killed Officer Anthony Holly and attempted to kill Officer Goya, and then started to run away, took another shot, went around the corner, and then took his last shot. Count 2, attempted first-degree murder. Well, attempted first-degree murder requires also 3 elements. The defendant attempted to cause the death of a person. Well, when you're citing somebody, the other officer, especially one officer, especially after you killed one, you pretty much know that's what you're doing. And that he engaged in conduct knowing, intending, or knowing that the conduct would cause the death of a person who the defendant knows is a law enforcement officer. Of course he was a law enforcement officer. Of course it was the defendant. Of course he had a gun in his hand. And he was citing it. He already killed one. What's another one? And the law enforcement officer was in the line of duty. It was a try. That's why it was an attempt. It wasn't a successful try, but it was a try nonetheless, and that's what the attempt is. And so, under these instructions, the defendant is guilty of that crime. But there has been some evidence that was presented for you to consider. There was evidence for you to consider. And that was in this form, if you will, of this defense that I was telling you about. The one that's a faith-based defense in a magical, mystical sort of reality that they want to create irrespective of the facts here. And in order to better understand this defense, I want to talk to you about an individual by the name of Lorenzo Quijano. And Lorenzo Quijano was an older gentleman. And this gentleman was 75 years old, maybe 80. He was an older gentleman who began reading, and he read a lot. And he began reading all these books about being a knight and about how they do good things in the name of somebody, and they go out and they fight, but it's always on the side of right. And so, as he got older, he started to believe that the era was that of knight-errantry. And he believed that he could partake in it. And he decided that he would do something about it. He decided that he would go and get this armor his great-grandfather had up there. And he brought it down, you know what time was it? Anyway, he shined it up, and very pretty. And it looked good, and it fit him. But there was a problem. This armor didn't have a helmet or a visor. So he went about constructing one, of paper mache. And he put it together to the point that it actually looked like the armor. But he might have needed a sword, so he went out and found a sword and made it sharp. Now he had this sword. Now he had this helmet. But before he did that, he also realized that a knight is a horse. It was this old bag that he had out there in the corral, and he decided to use that horse. And he gave it just a wonderful name, because a knight can't go out there without a horse with a good name. So he gave the name Rocinante. What he was doing is creating a reality. It exists, just like they did. So he named the horse Rocinante. But if he's going to go out and fight, if he's going to be a knight, if he's going to do all of these good deeds, he has to have somebody to do them for. And there was a lass, a young girl, that was down the block, and her name was Alonzo Lorenzo. But he's not going to use that name. Again, he's got to create his reality. Create another reality from what he has there. And he gave her the name of Dulcinea del Toboso. So now he's got all of that. And he's got the helmet. But he's got to test this helmet, even in his reality that he's now created, which is fictionalized. It's in his head. It's without regard to the true events that are going on in his life. Takes that sword, raises it over his head, brings it down, and slices that helmet. That sword, raises it over his head, brings it down, and slices that helmet right in half. Well, ain't working so good, as they say out in the street, with regard to that helmet. So what does he do? He's not going to be deterred just because he has a setback. Just like there's a setback here, he's going to continue on with this alter reality. And what he does is, again, he constructs a helmet and a visor the same way that he did before. He brings it up, it looks great, it fits, almost ready to go. He's going to test it. Got to test it again. Raises that sword, holds it up, got to bring it down. You have to have faith. You have to have faith in your beliefs. Don't test it. Just like here, don't test what they presented to you. Just have faith in what they're telling you. And well, what does this individual do? Well, to complete the picture, one of the things is that he's got to give himself a name so he can go out and he can do these good deeds. So he can create his own reality like they wanted to create for you here. And he gave himself the name of Don Quixote de la Mancha. And so now he's ready. He's got the horse, Rocinante. He's got Dulcinea del Toboso. He's got his armor. He's got it all. He's taken parts of reality and created something totally different. A magical world, just like they want you to go into this magical world. And when he goes out, he wants people to believe in him. That's part of it. And he does come across a guy who's having problems with his wife. That's really what it comes down to, who's out riding the donkey. And he convinces this guy to go with him. His name is Sancho Panza. Just like they're trying to convince you about this alter reality. Sancho Panza is a skeptical, but give it a shot. That's what they want you to do. At least give it a shot. And so what he does is they go out and they start looking at things. And they start talking about what they're going to do. And at one point, in terms of what's going out there, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza crest the hill. You get up on this hill and you can just see the expanse out there. And you can see really far. And one of the things that they're able to see is this cloud of dust. And then there's another cloud of dust that's coming together. Don Quixote sees something. What he sees is a situation where he can become this hero. And he thinks it's two armies coming together. When in fact, all it is one flock of sheep crossing the road, the other flock of sheep crossing the road the other way. And Sancho Panza tells him that. Hey, this is just nothing but sheep. What are you doing? No, I see something different here. I see monsters, not monsters, I see these two armies. And so he rushes on down, he's got his lance out, he's going down there, and of course he starts injuring the sheep, he starts hitting things, and what ends up happening is that the shepherds, they're going to put up with that, start throwing rocks at him. And they get him off his horse, they injure the horse, and they injure him, and they bring him down, and old Sancho Panza bringing up the rear, and he said, I told you that they were sheep. And he said, you just don't understand. You don't see things like they should be. And that's what they're telling you in this particular case. For example, one of the things that they told you in opening statement, one of the things that they told you was, in plain English, ShotSpotter uses microphones to pinpoint. First of all, let us hear the shots, and second of all, to pinpoint the location of the shots. We can listen to them. We can count them. We can pretty much see them. See? In their reality, based on shots fired, they want you to think that in that altered reality that they're presenting to you, that you can see the shots. Let's talk about shots fired. From the top, under optimum circumstances, for that 1 mile that it covers, it's only 80% accurate. If everything is as good as it's going to get, it's only 80% accurate, which means it's 10% wrong. To start with, is that scientific, objective evidence? If you start at medical care with the fact that the doctor is going to be 20% wrong, is that something that is acceptable? Of course it isn't. And that's science, not something that's 20% wrong. And what else do we know? Well, that area of error gets even bigger when you look at the fact that if something's out of the coverage area, well, if it's out of the coverage area, the accuracy even goes further. It goes down even further. So instead of 80% accurate, you're now what, 60%? And here, this killing, whether they want to make it any other way, was at 60th Avenue in Oregon. It was not north of Missouri. There's no doubt about it. They may want you to think that. They may want you to get to that 80%, but it is not. There's nothing they can do about it. They may want to alter the reality all they want, but it is not something that they can change. But you know what? They want you to see it that way. That's what they want you to see. Well, again, that's a problem for them. The other problem for them is that all of these sensors were not working. Even if it was going to happen within the coverage area, 4 of the sensors weren't working. To the point where their own experts said that this scientific objective evidence was crippled. It wasn't really worth a darn. It wasn't working at all. Can't even get the time right. They got the time that's 3:29 in the afternoon. So what is it? What else? Well, it can't even get anything right because the sensors aren't even there. Well, they tell you what, one of the sensors could hear something. Well, where's the 4th sensor that was out? This expert can't even tell you which 4th sensor was out. And so if you take a look at Exhibit 367, they tell you about sensor number 2, sensor number 11, and sensor number 15. Who's to say that's not one of the ones that was out? Do you have any confidence, based on the way he testified, based on the way that system was running that way, that one of the sensors wasn't these, the ones that were on? Any confidence whatsoever in that system? Well, in the reality they want you to, but 4 of the sensors were out. They can't even tell you which other one was out. And he says, I did my computations with regard to sensor number 3, a sensor that had been vandalized by the homeowner. It wasn't working, but it worked for him. I want you to believe that reality. It worked for him. I could hear the pulses. Didn't record anything, but I could still hear the pulses so that I could do my calculus or band medium calculus or whatever the heck you call it. It's calculus. I wanted to impress you with how good he was at who initially said it was a firecracker. Again, there's a problem with that. He went in there and changed it to gunshots, and when there's a record of it, he says, I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. That's an individual who's trying to sell the system to you. Maybe not so much for this case, maybe for this case, maybe for the system itself. But this system now is no longer in the coverage area. We have 4 sensors that are out. Only 3/4 of the system is working, and it's crippled by his own admission. So, what, is it 10% effective? 20% effective? Is that the objective scientific evidence? Is that the reality that you want to follow? Is that the path that you want to take to follow this defendant? Is that what you want to do? And say, aha, there you go, reasonable doubt, I can base it on this. And that's the term they use. Scientific, objective evidence, something that, what, 90% wrong? Is that the kind of, for example, the medical treatment that you would want? And one of the things that he didn't want to admit was that even when he did it, in Exhibit 378, this is what he found. When he read the data and the shots, firecracker events came out, this is the address that he came up with. 6028 was Maryland Avenue. That's a mile and a half. And the way the system is supposed to operate is the officers hear the dot or see the dot, and they run to it. Well, if the officers went to that place, it would have been a mile and a half away. What confidence can you possibly have in that reality? What confidence can you possibly have in this system that they touted to you as a bastion of truth, some light that you can follow? Well, if you follow it, you would end up wrong, just like the officers would. And not only that, they marked it as 2 separate occasions, 2 separate firecracker events. This was one of them. And look at this one. This was at 5950 West Missouri. And what's even more damning for them about this is that when this system was originally looked at in Exhibit 380, the address was 6022 West Maryland. 6028 West Maryland. You can't even keep the same address right. The other one, well, that one was 5950 West Missouri. The updated one, 380 was 5939 West Missouri. This is on the south side of the street, whereas this right here is on the north side of the street. So, let's all get in line and follow them to this area, because that's where their defense is. That's where they want you to believe that the shooting happened. Let's all follow them now. If they say that this is the scientific evidence, is that they stood up here and told you that if that's the scientific evidence, follow them there. And what would you come up with? Nothing. You would come up with nothing because nothing happened there that's important to this case. Who's to say there wasn't an event there? Given how poorly that system was working, who's to say that something didn't happen there? He couldn't even tell you that because he was moving things around. And when he was asked, hey, did you know the location before? Somebody asked him, did you know the location before? No, I didn't. And then when he was pressed, wait a minute, isn't it true that you had a conversation with defense counsel? Yeah. And isn't it true that he discussed with you where he thought it was? Yeah, but I just didn't know where the location was. He's just trying to maybe slant it a little bit in favor of this system.
Mr. Martinez, let's go ahead and take our lunch break. It's noon time, so we're going to go ahead and take our recess. We're going to come back at 1:30. Until then, remember the admonition, and I'll see you at 1:30.